Baby, I'm playing on you tonight. Hunt you down, eat you alive. Just like animals, animals like animals, moles. And maybe you think that you can hide.
Hi there, I'm Dave.
And I'm Emile.
And we're here to continue our blogcast series on advanced Windows deployments. And today, I think what we're going to do, Emile, is we're going to cover a little bit about the post-configuration tasks required for hydration.
Right, so where we left off in the last session, we had completed our hydration environment and we got our reporting services completed. We went through the initial parts of discovery, doing the forest discovery and the system discovery. However, when it got to the point where we needed to install clients, we were running into failures. So now what we've got to do is we've got to take a step back from the configuration manager console and go into our domain controller. We need to make some group policy changes.
So with those group policy changes, these would be pretty much the same thing that we'd be expecting to do in production, right? So I think what we'll do is we'll maybe create a group policy to modify the default firewall rules that are going to come within our ViaMonstra domain. And I think it'd probably also be prudent to create a local administrator account so our configuration manager can access those clients in the lab properly. But the steps that people are going to learn here today, I think it's very important to understand that these are also going to be valuable for the field. Do you not agree?
Right, absolutely. And even if you work for an environment where you don't have the local firewall turned on, you still need to go in and do these group policy modifications because we have to get an account with admin rights down to those workstations.
All right, so let's jump into our demo here. Okay, so we're back in our lab environment here, and we're going to be working for the purpose of this demonstration on a virtual machine called DC1. DC1 is the only domain controller in this hydrated environment for a fictitious company and domain called ViaMonstra. And this is where we're going to be making the required changes. So during this demonstration, what we're going to do is we're going to do three things. Number one is we're going to take and we're going to create a Active Directory security group that's going to be used to assign local administrative access to our workstations that are going to be controlled by Configuration Manager. That's going to be called set local admin. So our hydration didn't do that for us. Once again, we could have fully automated that, but then we wouldn't have much to show you after the fact. So we're just going to go ahead and show you how to use something called a restricted group in Active Directory. And then the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to make a quick modification to a group policy that we'll create by just opening up a couple firewall exemptions that will allow our configuration manager client to talk properly. And then the last thing that we're going to do is we're going to take and we're going to set and configure something called the client push account in Configuration Manager. So what's the first thing that we want to do here, Emile?
Okay, so the first thing that we're going to want to do is open up Active Directory users and computers. We really like to use shortcuts around our domain controllers. Often we're in data centers that don't have mice. So over the years we've kind of learned that all of these control panel applets and Microsoft Security snap-ins have
extensions on them.
Right, and we can type those right in from the Run menu. So Active Directory users and computers, also DS administration, is dsa.msc.
Okay, so I'll just type dsa.msc, which I've already typed here. Go ahead and click OK. And voila, there you go. So we can open up Active Directory users and computers. We can also do things like open up Active Directory sites and services and anything that's going to carry a .msc extension. So if you want to learn what these are, a little tip from the field is you can actually search your Windows subsystem and do a search for star.msc, and that'll give you all of these MMC applets that are pre-installed in your machine.
Right, and what's the extension for control panel applets, Dave?
So the control panel applets carry an extension called .cpl, and so similarly you can search for star.cpl and you can get all of the control panel applets.
Awesome.
Okay, so where we're going to store this is we're going to store this inside of our corp.viamonstra domain. We have a sub OU here called ViaMonstra, and we have a security groups OU that's been pre-created. This structure that you see for the lab with security groups, servers, service accounts, users, and workstations is all created as part of hydration. And so if I click on service accounts, for example, you can see how I have all of my service accounts that we're going to use throughout the purpose of building our configuration manager environment. So the one that we're particularly interested in that we're going to touch in a second here is this one called CM_CP, which is for client push. So the first thing we want to do is we're going to want to create a new group. And so what's the name of this new group? Does it actually matter what it's called?
It really doesn't matter. I mean, we like to be a little bit descriptive here. We're not firm believers in security by obscurity. So we're just going to call this group Set Local Admins because effectually that's what this group is for.
Okay, perfect. And we're going to create this as a global group, and we're going to create this as a group type of security. And an interesting point here is that the difference between a security and a distribution group, one of them has a security identifier, a SID, and one of them doesn't. So one of them can be used and placed on access lists, and one of them can't. And so the type here, security, is the one that will actually get an ACL that's created for it. So it has a SID. Awesome. So click OK. And now what account do we want to add to this one?
We're going to add CM_CP for now.
All right, so CM_CP, check names, found it, perfect.
So as we go through this advanced Windows deployment guide for our book, effectually, we're going to be adding another user account or two to the local administrators once we get down to implementing some of these 1E solutions. The reason why we're doing this behind a group right now and not just adding the CMCP account to local admins via the GPO is now we actually only have to go in and modify this GPO the once. When we need to add an additional local administrator account down the road, we just need to go into DSA and add the account into this Set Local Admins group.
All right, wonderful. So what's the next step that we have to go through and do here, Emile?
Okay, so now with that group created and the account added in, we need to go into our group policy management console.
So to get into the group policy management console, we can just type gpmc.msc. And then what we can do is this has already been expanded once because I've come into the lab, but we'll just expand the forest, the domain, the corp ViaMonstra. We'll come into the ViaMonstra organizational unit, and where we want to link this group policy object to is an organizational unit called workstations. So if I actually go check in Active Directory users and computers, I can see that all of my respective PCs that have been built as part of the lab are going to be inside of the context of this organizational unit. So when we link this group policy object here, then what will end up happening is these clients will fall under the scope of that policy.
So this is a good double fail-safe, especially if your organization isn't looking to manage certain machines or servers, for example, into Configuration Manager. By not giving that CMCP account local administrative rights to the servers, we're not going to be able to deploy clients to them regardless of what we try to do.
All right, so the next step we want to do here is we want to right-click on the organizational unit called Workstations, and then we're going to click on Create a GPO in the domain and link it here. Now, what's the name that we want to call this? Does this name actually matter either, or are we just going to use something just kind of lab-specific here?
Yeah, we're just going to do something descriptive. So configure local admins, configure client push.
So we'll call this one Configure Client Push. How does that sound?
Perfect.
All right. And then how do we get in there and edit this group policy object now that we've nicely created it?
We right-click and choose Edit.
Awesome. Okay, so now if we want to modify the firewall settings, which is going to be the first area that we're going to get into, I think it's really important to note and for viewers to understand here that there's actually a little bit of a bug inside of the group policy object editor when you're dealing with firewall policies. And Emile, what is that bug?
Well, it's kind of strange. If you're going in and using a group policy to do multiple things like we're going to be doing here, we're going to be combining firewall rules with adding an account to the local administrators group. Whenever you're modifying Windows firewall properties inside a group policy, if you make another change outside of those firewall rules, the rules are lost when you save the group policy file. So what we need to do is we need to actually modify this GPO twice. The first time we're going to go in, do our firewall exceptions. We're going to then close and save the file and then reopen it again the second time.
Okay, perfect. So where should we navigate to make these firewall changes?
Okay, so we're going to expand policies.
So under computer configuration, policies, yep.
Then administrative templates.
All right.
Network.
Okay, just give me 1 second. I'm just going to maximize this here so everybody can see what's going on.
Okay, under network, we're going to go to network connections.
All right, I see it right here.
Then Windows firewall.
Okay.
And once we expand that, we have the profiles listed below. And this is based upon whether your machine is on a domain or on a public or your home network connection.
Okay, perfect. So if I were to take and use this to modify firewall settings in my production environment, would these types of settings work on both servers as well as workstations?
Most certainly, yes.
Awesome. Okay, and so we just want to really probably watch the scope that we're creating these with. Okay, so what's the first policy here that I want to enable specific to Configuration Manager?
Okay, so the first one is going to be to allow inbound file and printer sharing.
Okay, so do you guys remember in the last video, we had an error message when we went to go do the client push. It said that it had a tough time connecting to the admin $ share on those clients that we tried to push out to. One of the reasons for that is because the firewall was actually actively blocking those connections. So when we open this particular setting up, that piece will start to work for us. So that's why we actually want to make this change. So to turn it on and to create the exemption, all we have to do is just change the group policy object state here, this item, to enabled. So we'll go ahead here. And I think there's one more that we have to make as well, correct?
Yeah, there's one more, and that's to allow inbound remote administration.
All right, allow inbound remote administration exemption. Is that the one?
That's the one.
Okay, so same thing. We'll just double click on it. We'll click enabled. Now we don't want to get burned by that bug, right? So all we have to do is close this down. Now, if you've never worked a lot with group policy before, there's no real save button, is there, for a group policy object? When I close this, are these settings going to be pretty much live?
Yeah, we've linked this already to an organizational unit. So this GPO, as soon as we close it, it's live and making those changes on the clients.
Yeah, so the clients are going to have a staggered refresh interval. So sometime within the next 90 minutes by default, clients will start randomly checking in to start running a process called GP update. So from this point on, if we had a client that was within a cycle, if 1 minute from now that was their triggered timer, they could start to pick up these changes right away. So if you're in production and you want to make these changes offline, you can do it one of two ways. You can create a just placeholder group policy object and just create it on the group policy objects node, or what we can do is we can unlink this. So in production, when I'm building these, I typically don't build them hot and live. What I'll do is I'll unlink the group policy object first, and then I have a little bit better control mechanism for testing it. Because we're in the lab environment here today, I don't really care if the clients are picking this up on the fly, so these changes are fine. So the next thing that we're going to do is we'll go back into the group policy object editor. We'll edit this. Let me just maximize this again. And now what we want to do is we want to take and we want to configure this local administrator, set local admins, as an administrator account, which has the CM_CP account, that service account, on each of the local machines, PC001 through PC004. So Emile, how would I go about doing this in the group policy object editor?
So we're going to stay under computer configuration again. This time we're going to go to policies and then Windows settings.
All right, so I'm working my way through there right now. Just let me expand this again. Give me 1 sec.
Okay, under Windows settings we have security settings.
Okay, so just taking a moment to open here. I keep leaving my thumb on the touchpad here, that's why that's closing. Okay, I see the restricted group section, and I see it's empty.
Right, so that's exactly where we want to go. And there are a couple of places inside of the computer configuration portion of group policy where you can modify the local administrators group. There's a specific reason why we use the restricted groups. When we add a group inside of this node, it gives us the ability to append whatever is already in the local administrators group on a machine. And this is very, very important, especially when you're dealing with servers, because a lot of times various management groups in your enterprise will have modified the local administrators group for their own means. And you don't want to be going out and wiping that. So this way we can append.
So another reason that I really like using local the restricted groups node in here, Emile, is I like using this because when I grant local administrators to something, either a workstation, a server, or something like that for my administrative group, my server operators group, or desktop admins group, I don't want somebody that has local admin rights to be able to remove me and effectively take away my rights on that machine.
That's a great point.
So when I set this through restricted groups, you can't actually remove that object from local administrators. So it prevents even a local admin, for all intents and purposes, from removing and restricting my rights as an enterprise administrator for the desktop or the servers. So that's another reason that I really like using that as well. And I've seen a lot of my clients at large organizations do the same thing. So to configure this is super easy. All you're going to do is you're going to right click on restricted groups and you're going to click on add group. Then what we're going to do is just browse for our group. I can just type the word set in here because I think we called it something like set local admins.
Correct.
Okay, and it found that group.
Perfect.
Okay, that was the group that we created earlier. I go ahead and I click OK. You'll notice how it uses the NetBIOS name / set local admins. Go ahead and click OK. And then now what it's asking me for is it's saying what group membership do you want this to become a part of? Because you don't just need to use this for members of administrators. Maybe I wanted power users, or maybe I wanted server operators or backup operators. You can use it for any of those contexts on those machines. The group that is there though just has to be available on that local workstation. Okay, so what we're going to do here is we're just going to say members of this group are. And so which node do we want to click on here, Emile?
We're just gonna say this group is a member of.
Okay, so we want to use the bottom node, right?
Yes.
Okay, and then I think we just have to type this in here, right? Can we browse here as well?
I don't believe so. What we need to do is built-in, because we're on a domain controller, built-in administrators doesn't exist.
Okay, so I'm just going to type it in here. I'm just going to type in administrators. Hopefully I typed that in right. I can't even see what I'm typing right now. So that looks correct, Emile?
Mm-hmm.
All right, so then we'll just go ahead and we'll click apply. Member of administrators. Don't think we've got any typos. Oh, we do have a typo. I've got 2 I's in there. Let's go ahead and remove that. Add. Help if I could type correctly. Admin. That should be correct. Now we only have 1 I. So we could have had a little bit of a troubleshooting exercise there as to why our local administrators weren't being set properly. So this just goes to lead into another important point. Always double and triple check your work. And you should always work with the group policy objects not linked, because if it was linked and I clicked OK in there, these settings are once again hot and live, and somebody could have just picked up the wrong administrator function, and we could have been throwing some errors on our clients. Okay, so now what's the next thing we have to do? Do we have to do anything else inside of this group policy object?
No, we can close it right down now.
Okay, so I'll close this down. And now what would we do in the event that we wanted to push this group policy object out to all of these client computers? Did you know that there's actually a possibility for us now to right-click on a group policy object, not on the object itself on the right-hand context menu, but we can take and we can expand it here. We can find the group policy object on the left-hand tree view. I can right-click on this, and there's new context options inside of here. All right, so I've always got little bags of tricks up my sleeve here, and one of the things that I like to do inside of the demo environment in production is I like to show off some of the new features that Microsoft adds in, especially those that are included as part of group policy. So did you know, Emile, that you can actually take an organizational unit, and let's say I want to push this group policy out now. It's really important. These are actually critical firewall settings that we have to make changes on. Did you know that inside the group policy management console, you can actually right-click on your organizational unit, and there's an option here that says Group Policy Update. Did you know that you could actually use this?
Oh, wow.
Okay, so there's a couple little caveats to this, though. In order for this to work, I need to make more firewall exemptions.
Of course.
So, to make sure that we don't actually bore you with having to go ahead and create some firewall exemptions, why don't I show you how to create a new group policy using PowerShell, and
That's
maybe using a concept called starter GPOs. All right, so let's go ahead and let's do that now. So for purposes of the lab and to not bore you with having to type this out, I'm a big fan of using the integrated scripting engine that comes with your PowerShell. So I've already got this open. And so what we've got here is I've actually got the actual PowerShell command created for us here. So the cool part about this is that we're going to go ahead and we're going to create a new group policy object here, this time without even having to go into it. And we're going to take and we're going to call it Configure Firewall for Remote GP Update. Well, that sounds like a pretty good idea, right? Then we're going to create it with a starter GPO name. And so inside of the group policy management console here, we can see an object in here called starter GPOs. And by default, you actually have to click a little button here that actually enables the starter GPO store, because otherwise it's not available by default. So this will take and this will create this. There's one in here by default called Group Policy Remote Update Firewall Port. So we're going to just take and be leveraging this as part of our group policy, as part of our PowerShell script. Then what we're going to do is we're going to take and we're going to link that to the domain. So we're going to put that right at the top level. So this is available for everything. So us moving forward in the lab, I can actually just update group policies right from here. Now, what if I'm a real PowerShell junkie and I don't really want to take and update these group policies from within the group policy management console? Is there a PowerShell command for this now that you can actually just run?
Absolutely. Pretty much everything now in group policy you can run via commandlet.
Okay, and so what's the name of the group policy that we can take and that we can run?
It's invoke-gp update.
All right, so it would be invoke-gp update. There we go. And so you can actually trigger this remotely on remote computers, so right from within PowerShell. So if I'm on my domain controller, I make a quick change, and I want group policies to be triggered right away, I can simply just take and I can run that commandlet as well, or I can just go right from within the group policy management console. So that's pretty cool. So let's go ahead and let's try our first line here. We'll run this and see if this actually works for us. Well, it looks successful. Anytime you don't see red in PowerShell, that's normally a very positive sign. Let's go back into our group policy management console. We'll refresh the top here. And there we go. We can see that configure firewall for remote GP update policy has been created and linked. And we can probably actually go see that there's some settings that have been configured in here. And you betcha. So we've got some settings that are configured here that will now take and open this up and make this ready to go. And it really is that simple with PowerShell, my friend. So I think that's pretty cool. Now I've got a question for you. Will this work? If I right-click right now and I try to run this update group policy, will this actually work? Or do I have to wait for that first policy to actually kick in to open up the firewall ports?
It's not going to work. Firewall is turned off currently on these turned on these workstations, so it's going to block these requests by default.
That's right. So if we did this in a production environment, what would happen is sometime within the next 90 minutes, our clients would start refreshing their policies on their own. They would pick this up, and they would take and open up the firewall not only for Configuration Manager, they would also open up the firewall now for remote GP updates. So you got actually kind of a double win there for your environment. So I think that's pretty cool. All right, so what is the next thing that we have to take care of here, Emile?
Well, now that we've got client push turned out and we've got effectively, we now have our nice little coffee break while we wait for the policy to apply onto our clients, we can now go back in and deploy our clients.
So can we deploy our clients, or do we have to actually set the client push account first?
Well, PC001, since it's been less than a week since we attempted to push that one, that PC is automatically going to get deployed sometime in the next hour once it receives this new group policy update. The next 3 PCs are still going to sit there without a client. So now we have one of 2 possibilities. We can select those 3 PCs and follow the same process to install the client. Or what we can do is we can enable another feature inside a Configuration Manager, and that's turning on client push, enabling default client push. So what that will do is whenever Configuration Manager gets a resource that it doesn't have a Configuration Manager client on it, it will automatically attempt to push out the client to that machine and get it online.
Awesome. Okay, so we've waited for about half an hour here, and now our group policies have applied to our clients. So one of the things that we're going to do now is we're going to go over to our client, PC001, and we're just going to make sure that those firewall exemptions have actually come down properly. So what's one of the tools that we can use for that? Emile. So we can use, could we use GP update, or could we use GP result or something like that? Maybe use GP result and see if the policies are actually coming down. We typically use that tool for troubleshooting, right?
Absolutely.
So why don't we just use that, and we'll go ahead and we'll show people how to actually validate that these policies have in fact come down to our machine. Okay, so we've now waited about 30 minutes, and we want to take and make sure that inside of our lab environment that everything looks good. So what we're going to do is we're going to go over to PC001, and one of the things I'd like to do is just make sure that that group policy object has indeed successfully applied. So how are we going to do that, Emile? What tool can we use that's built in that will allow us to check if a group policy has been applied properly?
Well, there's 2 or 3 ones we can use. We could go and we could run a result and set a policy on that computer. We could use GP update to see what actually gets forced. Or one of the ones that I like to use is GP result with a full output to a text file.
Okay, I think we can do that with a /Z,
Exactly.
and then we can just pipe that out to a text file, right?
Exactly.
Okay, so let's go ahead and bounce over to PC001. We'll give that a shot, and we'll just make sure that our policy has indeed come down, and then we can perform the last step, which is just taking and doing some final configuration in Config Manager and making sure we can push clients.
Awesome.
Okay, so we're back over on PC001, and what we're going to do here is we're just going to go ahead and open an administrative command prompt. We're going to run a command called, I'm just going to make a directory here called temp on the C drive, so somewhere to dump some stuff. Now what I'm going to do is run the utility gp result /Z, and we can just pipe that out to a text file. So I'll just call this C:\temp /GP result log. And another little trick that you can have here is you can actually immediately open that log file once this is done, and you can actually concatenate your command lines. This is going back a few years now, Emile. So I can run a second command, and then what I can do is I can actually just go start, which will open the command by default, which is set for log viewers, which is Notepad, and I can just go C:\temp /GP result.log. All right, so should we give this a shot?
Perfect.
I probably made a typo in there, so I'm not going to go back through and recut a video for that. So we're just going to go ahead and open this the good old-fashioned manual way here. And I'm going to scroll down, and we'll see if we've actually got our policies applying to us. So, Emile, how can we tell if group policy objects are actually indeed applying to a client machine? Can we see the ones that we've created in here?
Absolutely. The 2 of them that we're looking for are listed right there under Applied Group Policy Objects. Config Client Push, and the default one that you added in.
Yeah, so if we scroll down here, we should be able to see some firewall settings, and there we go. So this one here looks like it should be good to go. So now what we're going to do is we're just going to pop over to the Configuration Manager server, which is CM01, and we're going to go ahead and do a final configuration, which is setting the client push account, and we'll try to push this again. Okay, so we're back on our Configuration Manager server here, Emile. So now what's the next step here? We're gonna take, and are we gonna attempt to just maybe try to do another client push on PC001, or do we wanna show the errors again, or do we wanna just finish the configuration? Because would this work right now if we tried to do another client push by simply just right-clicking on this object PC001 saying install client? Would this actually work for us yet?
No, there's one more step that we actually have left out of this process right now. But let's go back in, let's go to our log files, and like I mentioned a couple of casts ago, once the client push fails, it's going to continue to try that for a number of days, once an hour. So let's go back in and look at that CCM log file.
Okay, so where were our log files again, Emile?
Under your D drive, it's under the installation directory for Config Manager. Now, from the hydration kit, that is D Config Manager logs.
Okay, and what was the name of that log file we were looking for again?
It's CCM log.
Okay, we'll go ahead and open this up again here. We'll see if there's any activity going on. And so we scroll to the bottom of this one here, and we can see it looks like it's just in a sleeping state for the next 700 or so seconds. But if we just search in here for PC001 up from here, we can actually see the last time that this is actually tried. So we can see that at some point in time today, maybe at around 1:35 p.m., this is actually trying to deploy again, and we can see that it has indeed failed.
Okay, so rather than go through and go through the process of right-clicking and installing client again, I'm going to show you how Configuration Manager actually processes these retries. So if we go back into our File Explorer, we're going to go to the Configuration Manager install directory.
Okay, so the Configuration Manager install directory, I'm
Right.
there, yep.
Okay, let's go to the Inboxes folder.
All right.
And then we see a ccretry.box folder. Let's go in there, and we should see one file. Dave, can you just right-click on that file and go cut for me, please?
All right. Done.
Okay, now we're going to go up to the Inboxes folder again.
So I'll come back to the Inboxes folder.
Okay, and now let's just paste that into the ccr.box folder.
ccr.box. Okay, so is that like a pickup folder or something like that?
Exactly. Drop it into improc.
Okay, so we want to drop that into improc. Done. Okay, now how long do we have to wait once it's in there for it to pick that up?
It's pretty much instant.
All right. Just move this around so we can kind of see what's going on. So, Emile, are you sure that's in the right folder there?
No, it actually goes into the root ccr.box folder.
Oh, I went one folder too deep. Sorry, I'm a bit of a config manager noob, so sometimes I actually drop these things in the wrong spot. So watch what happens when we drop it in here. Oh, that was pretty instant. So that was pretty instant that it looked like that it picked that up. And so now that's going to take and that's going to try to process that again. And it's going to eventually fail in a couple seconds here. So anyways, that's kind of neat so that you can see how those retries are processed and they'll stay in there. So if you ever have a bunch of retries that are stuck, what you can do is you can go into the CCR retry folder and you could actually, in theory, just wipe those out and it would stop the retry mechanisms of Configuration Manager because maybe you don't want it to keep retrying while things are broken.
Exactly.
Awesome. Okay, well that's a really important lesson. Thanks for that, Emile. That's really interesting to learn that. But it's still failing. So this is, my boss is breathing down my neck. We just bought this new shiny new sports car called Configuration Manager, and I still can't deploy clients. So how do we finish this?
Right, so although we've added our client push account to the local admins, we haven't actually told Configuration Manager to use that account. So right now it's trying to use the actual system account for the CMO1 server. So inside of our Configuration Manager console, we need to go to the administration workspace.
Okay, I'm heading there. Now where?
Okay, now we're going to go to Sites.
Okay.
And then up from the ribbon, we should see Client Installation Settings.
All right. So I see here Client Installation Settings.
Okay.
Yes, I see those.
Let's click that and go to Client Push Installation.
All right. And we could configure all this in Configuration Manager as well, correct?
Right, absolutely.
Now, is this a good idea to enable this automatic site-wide client push for servers and workstations? We seem to see this quite a bit, don't we?
Definitely. And right out of the gate with the brand new Configuration Manager environment, we strongly recommend you don't do this. The size of the client installation package and all of its entirety is 180 megs. We don't want to be blasting that 180 meg file out to tens of thousands of machines. Once we've gotten our environment to a place where we have all of our computers in Configuration Manager, you can go ahead and turn this on so that any stragglers will be picked up in this way. For now, we're not going to do that. We're just going to go to the Accounts tab.
All right.
And then click the New Star.
Is it going to be a new account or existing account? I think we talked about this last time, right?
Yes, it's going to be a new account.
All right. And so what's this new account going to be called? We could just browse here, right?
Yep. And
all right.
It's CM_CP for client push.
All right. Looks like we found that. That's good. And it looks like it's giving me an option to put in a password here. This is pretty important, isn't it? Because if we change the password on that service account, do we have to come back and change that password in Configuration Manager?
Most certainly. A couple of recommendations behind this account. One is that you set the password to not expire so that we don't have to do this. The other thing is there's a group policy that we can configure that'll prevent people from using this account to actually log on to computers. And that's a really good security precaution because we are granting this account local administrative rights on the bunch of workstations.
Or because I love PowerShell so much, I could probably just write a PowerShell script that would just go reset this value and reset the account password at the same time. So we could do that. We could do that as well, right?
Absolutely.
So lots of different ways to take in to configure that. So now we're just going to go ahead and verify this, because if I type this in wrong, guess what? We're going to keep failing. So I'll go ahead and verify this. We can just go to any network share with this account. So one of the network shares that's always available for us is a share on DC01 called sysvol. So we should be able to test the connection into our sysvol, right? And it is successfully verified. That means that I did not fat finger the password. That's always promising. Go ahead and click OK and OK. And is there anything else I need to do here again, or should we just try this?
No, let's just try this.
Should we try via our retry method, or should we just push this again?
Well, let's go ahead and push to all 4 clients now.
All right, so we would come back to the assets and compliance node here. I could simply just highlight all 4. Is that a valid option?
Absolutely.
Right click on them and say install client. Click next. And what were my settings here? I think we just chose this option here for install the client from the specified site. That was the only one that we needed, right?
Yes. Now the middle option there, always install the client software, is if you're doing an upgrade from an older version of Configuration Manager, or there's an older build on some of your workstations, you can select that button to force the new bits to be pushed down and installed on the client. Now, a lot of times when you're troubleshooting client installations, especially with new environments, one of the things you may want to do is actually do a full reinstall of that client. So by selecting the middle option there, Dave, always install the client software, will also give us the ability to check a box down below to uninstall existing Config Manager client before the client is installed. So what these 2 checkboxes will do is, if there's a client installed, it's obviously going to uninstall it. But it's also going to empty that CCM setup directory. So everything that's already been downloaded to PC001, for example, before, is now going to be completely removed and replaced with the client installation media that's on the server itself.
Okay, so as soon as I click next here and I finish this up, I should be able to go check my CCM log and see some stuff happening here, right?
Right.
All right, go ahead and click next and next. Looks like it's successful. That means we're done, right? Oh,
that means we're done.
All right.
We can go watch logs, or we can go for coffee.
All right, so let's see what's happening here. I see we're trying to push to PC003. I see we're trying to push to PC004, PC002, and PC001. Now, some of these may still fail because of the fact that the group policy may not have fully applied to some of those other clients.
Right. We didn't enable inbound WMI on these clients, so they're not going to be able to connect through WMI.
And so these clients here just haven't updated their group policy objects yet. So PC002, 3, and 4 have not yet updated their group policies. So that's to be expected. So as these go into a retry state, one of the things that we can remember is that we can go back to the inboxes folder. We can check in the CCM retry folder. And so once they actually fail out, they will now show up inside this folder. And so that'll clean itself up probably within, what, about a half an hour, 45 minutes in the lab as those clients come around. Or we could just simply log onto those boxes, force a GP update, and then as soon as the retry interval will come, then those clients should be okay.
Exactly. So a lot of the other logs that we look at, we mentioned in the last cast that we're looking to see installation succeeded. This client configuration manager process is not going to install the actual product. What it's doing is it's copying an executable down to the client and then initiating that executable. So what we're looking for in the CCM log specifically is that it started the service. So can we go do a find and look for service, or look for started?
So you want me to just go Control F here and look for the word started?
Yep.
All right, I can do that.
Okay, so there we see that we started the service CCM setup on machine PC001. So now at this point, for the installation process of PC001, this log is not doing anything for us anymore. We need to connect into the logs of the installation on that machine itself.
Now, can we do that remotely? Can I connect into those logs with CMTrace remotely to PC001?
Absolutely.
All right, let's go ahead and do that. Instead of me having to jump back over to PC001, we might as well do this with kind of an enterprise flair.
Right,
So
and we're just going to connect to the admin $ share because that's what CCM connected to start things off.
All right.
So inside of the admin share, you're going to see a CCM setup folder, and from in there, a logs folder. And it's the CCM setup log that we're looking for.
All right. And we can see that it's probably going to be installing some individual products in here. Now, there are a few prerequisites that do need to get installed with this. We didn't really talk about this, so let me just go ahead and minimize. I want to go back one folder here. And what we can see here is that there's several MSIs and executables that need to be deployed down to these clients. So we can see that there was 24, 31, roughly what, 80 megs? I don't know the exact number here, but there's probably, 80 megs and change that are going to get copied down to the client. I should probably actually know the real amount here, but
it's 180.
Is that what it is? It's 180 megs. See, that's why we have Emile on the cast with us, guys. He's a smart cat.
It changes with the version and the build of Configuration Manager 2012, but it's roughly around 180 megs. Now, one of the things to note here is you'll notice one of the files, the fourth from the bottom, is SCEP install. And that stands for System Center Endpoint Protection, which is the antivirus component that you get with Configuration Manager. Even though you may or may not be deploying endpoint protection into your environment, the bits are still put down with every client installation. So when you do get to the point where you want to enable System Center Endpoint Protection, all it is a simple policy change. There's no actual files that need to be transferred down to do the endpoint protection install.
All right, so I think we're pretty much done here. We could probably, within a few minutes, anticipate that once this is done, we should be able to come back into our All Systems collection here. You can right-click on All Systems, hit Update Membership, right? Say yes. And as soon as our clients start coming online and healthy, this Clients option here will actually say yes. So what we're going to do is we're going to leave the video here as it is because it's still going to take a few minutes for things to sync up. And when we come back for the next blogcast, we're going to now have a functional configuration and manager environment that we can start doing stuff with.
Wonderful.
All right, so let's just bounce back out of here. All right, so Emile, that was a pretty long demo. That could have been the longest demo in Tricon Elite's consulting recording studio history.
I'm pretty sure it was, Dave.
So I think that went on for probably a good half an hour, but we covered some really cool things in that session. So one of the things that was really cool for me was learning a little bit about group policy and learning how there's new PowerShell extensions, PowerShell commandlets to build group policies, starter GPOs, opening up the firewall exemptions for the Configuration Manager client as well as GP updates remotely from the GPMC. And then we learned a few things inside of Configuration Manager as well where we were taking and opening things up so that the actual client push account would work properly. And then you showed us a little bit of troubleshooting. So maybe just recap the troubleshooting you were showing us there.
Right. So these things that we went over today, especially concerning client push, are things that we see in the consulting environment frequently with new builds. A few steps left out, like not having that client push enabled. As we mentioned time and time again, working with Configuration Manager, going back to those logs is really key. We showed you where some of the failures were happening with that client push. Looking at the CCM logs, we were able to diagnose, the missing account, the firewall exceptions. So we showed you the process inside file structure where Configuration Manager reprocesses those client push attempts every hour and showed you how to manually do it yourself.
All right, so we're going to be doing this quite a bit here coming up for the next little while because we've got our book that should be coming out here any day now. It's called Advanced Windows Deployments Using 1E Software. So that should actually be available on Amazon here any day for you, so you can check that out. Also check out our blog site at www.checkyourlogs.net. And so once again, thank you for viewing, and we'll see you in the next blogcast.
Take care.